Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're diving into the world of fire restoration. Vague, I know, right? But when I get to these two guests, you'll understand why I left it at a very vague fire restoration. So first, I have Roger Thorpe. He has nearly 20 years of fire service experience. He specializes in fire scene investigation, origin and cause determination, and evidence handling. He conducts complex fire investigations for insurance and legal clients across New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, while also serving as a firefighter, EMT, and hazmat technician for the Department of Defense. He holds certifications from IAAI, NAFI, and NFPA. Roger uses advanced technology, including 360-degree imaging, to document and analyze fire scenes. Next, I have Michael Vervena. He is the VP of Sales and Business Development at iGuide. He drives iGuide's expansion, simplifying property assessment for insurance professionals. He coaches professionals on leveraging iGuide's 3D walkthroughs, floor plans, and precision measurements to improve efficiency and accuracy in damage assessments. He brings 20 years of experience in branding and product launches, and he's worked with TTI and Black& Decker before he joined iGuide in 2016. Please welcome Roger and Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm excited to cover fire restoration, especially with the way the year started, right? West Coast we had crazy fires, and then I believe a couple weeks ago, I was just curious about what was going on in the country, and I believe we had over 50 fires burning at one point in Oklahoma and even on the east coast of the country. So it's a much needed topic to be discussed. So I have questions for both of you, but is there anything you guys would like to add about yourselves at all that I missed in your intros?
No,
Well, one thing
great job.
I'll
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead. I'll just throw in today, like, and not in preparation for today's podcast. My daughter threw I guess a muffin in a microwave this morning, and it started on fire. And I'm like, I was in the basement. I could smell burnt toast. I'm like, am I getting old? Is it me? The fire alarm didn't go off, and I come upstairs, and the whole house is full of smoke. And I'm like, of course, on all days, like for today. But how quickly just my house smells like smoke. I still smell like smoke, and just how quickly that house filled up with smoke. It was crazy, and it was one little muffin. So I have all of a sudden a renewed interest in what we're doing here today. Like this is, so close to how quickly it could affect any one of us, I think is
Sure.
interesting.
Yeah, it can flip pretty quick. No, I think you did a great job. My background's not that interesting, but I really enjoy it. It's hard to find an audience sometimes when they're not in the fire service or fire investigation service. They don't really think about it or know anything about it. So it's always nice to hear someone who's interested and wants to hear about it
Yeah, I
because
would
it is interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely say too, people may see what you do, Roger, and not understand quite how you influence or affect our industry. But I think Michael just said it best. A little muffin could have potentially set his whole kitchen on fire, and
Sure.
you would have stepped in, right? While we do know the cause, there is still need for investigation and all of that stuff as well. So I think it's
Mhm.
extremely important to understand how not just our industry is there for those who are affected by fire, but also how other industries can come in and help us make our jobs a little bit easier, but also understand the science behind fire. I think that's definitely key too. So, how did you find your calling in fire science, scene investigator, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. I started out as a 18-year-old volunteer firefighter up here in New York. I loved it, every minute of it. And I knew from that point forward, when you go to school, nothing really, at least for me, nothing really made sense in school until I applied it to a subject that I loved. Math, science, you name it. And when I finally went to college and I applied science and math and those skills to firefighting and fire science, everything clicked. And so once I started volunteering, our particular county has volunteer fire investigators. They work as their own independent department, and they're a group of 10 guys and ladies who will respond 24/7 around the county when requested, and they will do origin and cause determination to help the local fire chief with whatever scene it is. It could be a car fire, house fire. And so I got onto that really early. I think I was 21 when I started doing that. I pretty much dove right into it, took to it, pretty fast, and took every class and training I could find. And eventually it led to the private sector. So if you're not aware, there's really two sides of fire investigation. There's a public sector and a private sector. Public sector, they're really looking for a crime. Was there an arson or an incendiary type fire? If not, that's good. Pretty much their job is done at that point. Um, that's great and all, but for me, it was always, well, what caused this fire? I want to know more. I understand it wasn't an incendiary fire, but was it a product failure and why? So I was given the opportunity years ago, about 14 years ago now, to go work for the private sector for a local, small insurance investigation company. And I jumped on with them. And suddenly my kind of eyes were open to the fact that, I have deep pockets now to work with, in regards to the insurance company. I can say, hey, I need an electrical engineer. I need to bring someone in and take apart this microwave or this stove and figure out what caused it. And for me, that was a huge bonus because not only do I get to do cool stuff and I get to document the scene, thoroughly, but I get to go to a lab now and be a part of a lab exam and buy, exemplar products to take apart alongside of our burnt one. So for me, that was great. And, once I went and became a career fireman, I started just doing this on my days off. When I'm not at my firehouse working, I do investigations for, like you said, various insurance companies and attorneys and law firms and private companies and whatnot.
That's very interesting. I would definitely say not a lot of us, probably in our space, can say that we fell in love with what we were doing at 18 or even 21, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I got into this industry at 25 years old and I'm now 35, so I've hit my 10 years. And, looking back, it's crazy to see where life takes you, right? I thought I was going to be in criminal justice somewhere. But I've pivoted and I've gone the emergency management and public safety, which is huge actually in
Oh, yeah.
restoration, right? And so hearing you talk about where you're coming from is actually really a big deal too, because you also help us through times of chaos, if I'm being quite honest, just you understand. And I think that's what helps us have better customer service and also get to the bottom of things a little bit quicker. So,
Sure.
Michael, for you, how did you start working with Roger or, where does iGuide fit in and what is iGuide? I know some people may not know exactly what it is and how does it assist with fire investigations just like Rogers?
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's start off with, who we are. I guess so everybody understands that. I mean, iGuide, we've been around for more than a decade now, and we started off in the residential real estate space. But what we have is a proprietary camera system that maps out interior spaces, and so what that does is it quickly documents and accurately captures a property's layout, dimensions, and visual documentation of that. It digitizes that space in essence. And so how that really helps, I guess, in the world of fire investigation is that, for an insurance investigator or an adjuster or to capture in-depth property data right away, it saves them time. You're working in a conditions that I think they're very difficult conditions, right? You have to wear a lot of gear, protective gear. There's a lot of I guess it's an environment that is not very conducive, or it can be damaging to your health and whatnot. And so going into those locations and trying to map them out, document them thoroughly, and being able to go back and revisit that data to understand that it really helps, I guess, the fire investigation in terms of comprehensive, accurate documentation. And Roger talks about this a lot. And like I've seen him in our other webinar, he talked about, documentation is a really big important component of what he's doing, but making it time efficient, reducing risk and liability, remote collaboration with all the different parties that are involved with this to virtually go in and look at that, or even if it goes to court, someone being able to state and walk someone through a scene, I think is really helpful. And then improved accuracy for estimating repairs and speeding up the whole process. And so not just solely in fire, but in the whole insurance claims industry. That's, really what we do. We document it. Our technology helps professionals like Roger quickly document a space, get accurate data, and then be able to go back and revisit and collect that work and in case something was missed or, just to answer questions that may come up after the fact. And so we've grown in this insurance space over the last several years because our technology is accurate and fast. So Roger's been working with us for the last couple of years and has been a proponent. And so we've been very fortunate to have him as a customer and an advocate for the iGuide, him using iGuide in his, his services. And we're just, I guess, privileged to be able to help him out in doing his job. So if we can make his life easier, that's kind of our goal.
Yeah, and I would definitely say too, I think especially in insurance, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? And so
Correct.
in order to, well, and I think it's in any project, but it's specifically in insurance, right? Because we're usually talking to somebody who has not been on the site, who may not understand all of the science and data, but if they're able to tell a story through documentation and any supporting information, it makes their job that much easier and they're able to ask the right questions, right? So I definitely think that this is a big thing. Documentation in our world is huge, especially for all involved, right? A lot of times we have other contractors in the space, and then we have professionals like Roger in the space. We may have industrial hygienists. And so the environment will actually change over time. And if you're not documenting through the process, that could be a huge issue. Especially for estimating, right? I think we've all seen that happen. And so, iGuide is not only there to help, professionals like Roger, it's also there for the carrier, it's there for the customer, it's there for the contractor. So it serves a huge purpose in this space. So, Roger, I'm going to go back to you and kind of ask you, how does this technology change your documentation of your environment and projects, and what challenges have you faced prior to having technology like this?
So Michael really, I mean, he hit it on the head as far as it's kind of an inhospitable environment we're in. Um, Prior to having the iGuide camera, documentation, like you mentioned, is key, of course. So I always start, and I still do incorporate a DSLR camera into my investigation purposes. So I used to start with, just a general overview scene of the front of the house or building. Do a 360 around and shoot one up and down the street, maybe the closest fire hydrant. And then the way I explain it to people is I always work from or least damaged, sorry, to most damaged, kind of working my progression towards where the fire probably originates based on the amount of damage. Um, Sometimes that's, hard to tell based on how big the fire is and how, in depth it got, how long it took the fire department to get there and put it out, or even in some cases, how much damage the fire department does to prevent the spread and really make sure it's put out. When that happened, I would, and this is a great example. This is, a 360. This is with the iGuide. We work from the outside in, least damage to most damage. So before the iGuide, I would have to, NFPA 921 states that we have to document the scene, and that includes a scene sketch. If the house is huge, you are potentially sketching the whole, every room of the house. Most investigators are not doing that. They're doing the room of origin. We'll call it, the room of origin is what we'll call it in this situation. You're going to work your way towards the room of origin, and I'll work, once you get to the room of origin and you start taking your measurements, you're logging things like where are the windows, the doors, where are the outlets, I'll ask the homeowners, hey, you have this many outlets in your room. What was plugged into each outlet? Was there a power tap plugged into the outlet? Was there, a power strip? What was plugged into each of those power strips if you had more than one? And in doing that, I'm building a scene in my mind of what the pre-fire room looked like. And I'm making a list, a hypothesis of what we need to really think about might have caused this fire and what we need to look at further, rule out, examine further, or potentially say, hey, we might have a product failure here. We might have a lithium ion battery powered device plugged into this outlet here. So before I died, I was doing everything you're seeing on the screen with a camera and taking 3, 4, 500 photos. I'd go into each room and snap a photo in 360 view, snap the ceiling, snap the floor. And with the eye guide, you can see all the little green dots on the blueprint there that it mapped out for me. There's essentially, 15, 20 scans, and the camera's doing the entire house and at the same time measuring it, which is, insanity that it is that accurate. Um, so now when I go back and, if I potentially go back in a year, 2 years, an attorney calls me and says, hey, this is going somewhere, or I need to clarify something. And, he says, what was the measurement from point A to point B? And I go, let me log into the iGod and I'll tell you right now. And I can, with triangulation in the software, I can figure out all kinds of measurements that I need to, or I can say, hey, here's a blueprint of the entire property. I will walk you through the fire scene the way I saw it. And I'll, narrate as we go. Like, this is how I got to this conclusion. This is how I narrowed it down to this room. This is how I narrowed it down to the corner of this room. And hey, based on our interviews, in the corner of this room was a lithium ion battery powered bicycle. And that pretty much, that nails our origin findings pretty well in the head. And then we're working on our cause. And the hypothesis in this case was lithium ion battery failure. Well, what do we need to do to go further with that and determine whether it was or was not a lithium ion battery failure? So before, obviously, the camera, it was a lot of photographing, a lot of tape measures, a laser measure in my hand, and a lot of time in this room to measure it out. And so that's time consuming. It's expensive, to build a client for X number of hours to really document a scene thoroughly. But this also, if it goes to court, I can go to a witness stand and say, this is how I found it as soon as I got there. The first thing I always do is scan the house, the property. And I'll say, this is how I found it. And then I'll walk them through of how I got to whatever conclusion we're going towards. And so yeah, it's a game changer. It really is.
Yeah, and I would definitely say when you got into the hallway there, Michael, you could tell that there was a ton of smoke and soot on the walls, right?
Yep.
They've removed pictures and everything, but looking at this, there's several rooms. You almost have to go into that back room and see what's going on. And was it the Peloton that had failure?
No, it was not.
Oh,
This
okay,
is a
because I was gonna
fire.
say actually the Peloton actually held up fairly well.
Yeah.
Like, but I was just curious, but it's interesting to see, something in your room that or office or whatever that's typical could be such a hazard and it probably ignited pretty quickly and burned really hot. And I think, this is able to tell a story. You can see all the rooms that were affected.
Mhm.
What was
It
one
also shows the power of closing your door too.
Right. I was just gonna say was the door
Oh,
closed in
wow.
that room, which is very true. You're sealing it off essentially in some way, shape, or form, and this tells a story, right?
Yep.
Um,
So on this
sure.
particular fire, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Mike, if you want to go to the unfinished room there, to the first bullet point, right in front of the door. There you go. Actually, that one's good too, actually. Um, yeah, so this is a bedroom fire we had in New York. I'll just give you a background. The gentleman was asleep in the bed. He had just recently gotten a bicycle, a road bike that he had modified with a electric motor and a lithium ion battery pack. And it was plugged in next to the Peloton. Mike, if you just go to the next bullet point. Yeah, that one. And then scroll to the right. And you'll see right here on the wall between the bathroom and the closet, there's a white, kind of a white,
Mm.
yeah, right there, a white mark with some damage. The gentleman had a bike, a bicycle leaned up against the wall charging at night. And he woke up sometime around, I think 3 a.m. it was. His wife and kid were in another room sleeping. And he heard popping noises and he saw things shooting out of the bicycle, which turned out to be the cells of the lithium ion battery pack were had thermal runaway and were shooting out of the battery pack and firing all over the room. And one of them had actually lodged itself into the wall right where that white mark is and caused this fire. So again, if this had gone to court, it's not going to, but if it had gone to court, I could say, hey, that scorch mark is 3 feet 2 inches from the floor. This is where it was, and this is what our witness statement gave us. Batteries shooting out of this bicycle, and this was a good use of the camera to really document the scene and get a lay of the land. And once I dug it all out, because I always dig it out after we scan it like this, we had found multiple cells all over the room that had been, essentially jettisoned out of this battery pack due to the thermal runaway.
When those sparks also can cause additional fires, right? Not just that specific origin, which is so scary. It could get out of hand really quickly. And thankfully he did wake up because it could have been a lot worse if he hadn't have woken up. It's
Absolutely.
scary. It happens so fast, right?
Yeah,
We actually had a fire a couple doors down from us, and I think the origin was in their garage, and it spread up to the upstairs, and they either had ammunition or fireworks in their garage, and they were going off in there, and
yeah,
that could have been, I mean, it probably made it worse, but there's instances like that. This would be great to have because you could actually see all of those things in these photos. So, Michael, I'm going to kind of bounce back to you. This is amazing, and you're able to click and make notes and all these things. How does this help enhance the documentation and benefit both the insurers and the claims process?
Sure. Am I still sharing my screen or?
It went away, but
no,
you can go ahead and
Oh,
share
wait.
again.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I can just speak to it. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different ways like it really can help. I think one, it just gives you comprehensive data, and I think I've heard Roger speak about this as well. It's just that pre-mitigate pre doing touching anything kind of scan so that you have that state and condition, and you can go back and look at that because not everybody makes it to that site at the same time, and what work is done. Roger's there doing work on the site, so he can easily share that with any of the stakeholders or the key people that need to know this is what the space looked like prior to me going into it. So and you could speak better to that, Roger, than I can. I think what we constantly hear back is that it's just making it's one, it makes you more efficient on the scene, on the job. You're able to get in and out faster, and then you're able to do work after the fact as well. So you don't have to sit in the location and doing the actual work, and you can take measurements, take off, stuff like that. And so I think that really is been a big point for us. One of the other things that we do is we give you a downloadable version of that file format as well, so that you could actually self-host it, download it, keep it in your files. Because especially with fire, I think you have to keep it for a number of years typically for a fire claim. And so as long as you have an older version of a viewer like Google Chrome, you can continue to open up that file and share that. The other nice thing is that you can download it and you can take it into, if you have to go to court, not all the courts have that ability to have Wi-Fi turned on. Some of them are pretty advanced, some of them aren't. And so being able to have that offline version to go in and testify and be able to do a disposition and walk someone through the actual what happened at the scene, it just it's more than like a picture's a thousand words. It allows you to tell that story and have people be able to visualize it. So that's been again that remote calibration, sorry, collaboration, or even collaboration within, or being able to communicate and tell that story, I think has been, it's a huge thing that we hear. And then, of course, the estimating process in terms of it, having accurate measurements, being able to, if it's, I don't think Roger you use this as much, but on the claims side, they're definitely turning these into an ESX sketch, or a diagram where you need now to estimate the damages and do the replacement value, help that policyholder get their, figure out, what the damages are and be able to move forward in terms of being able to close that claim. And I think that's a big part of it as well, is like, this is very disruptive. It's a tough thing to go through. And now you have to kind of rebuild from scratch. And so the faster that you can help people rebuild and get back, start that process, I think it's very helpful for everyone, the policyholder included. So
Yeah, and I would definitely say explanation of your line items and things like that would be fairly easy with the
yeah,
documentation, right? And I think again, you said pictures worth 1,000 words. In some cases, it's worth money for your estimate, and that money helps return the customer's business or home to as close as normalcy as possible. So I think, like again, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? And
yeah,
so this serves a huge purpose. And I'm going to bounce back to Roger really quickly. You talked about, using your camera and all of that back when this technology wasn't available. You know, how much has this helped you and your business and your position? Because I think it in the grand scheme of things, right? Before we would be with a notepad saying picture one is, picture two is, right?
correct.
And God forbid that picture didn't come out, then that
Mhm.
means you have to go back and retrace your footsteps, and that's not efficient or effective. And if you didn't have your computer on site, that would be a huge problem because chances are you had left and then you'd have to come back. And who knows who's been in and out of there at that point. The family is still probably walking in and out. So can you kind of talk about how iGuide has helped you advance your services?
Yeah, like you said, before the iGuide and before the iPad, it was a pen and paper and a pad. And if it was wet in there, God forbid the pen stopped working and the paper would get wet. And so the iPad certainly made things a lot easier, and the Apple Pencil. But then having the iGuide, our business plan with my company was, hey, we're gonna get this camera. It is our policy within our department, our agency, that we're scanning everything. You know, Granted, it's not a hole in the ground, and there's nothing to scan, but our policy is we scan it, and that's not only for our protection, so we can say, hey, this is what it looked like. We're happy to share the scans with opposing investigators on the other side if they need it. We're not hiding anything, and if anything, it just helps all of us get to the origin and cause, which is really what we're after. But our policy was to scan it for our protection to show this is what it looked like, but also to give another product to our clients. Attorneys have been blown away when I go, "Would you like a 3D link to the house?" And they go, "You can do that?" And I go, "Yeah, check your email." And they log in and they walk through it, and 360, VR, so to speak, on their screens, and it blows it away for them. It puts them on our shoes where we can walk them through, and it's a game changer. It really, because a lot of times, unfortunately, we will get attorneys that don't have any fire experience. They don't really know what they're looking at. They're not really sure how this works, other than who can we go after? Is there subrogation potential? And so I'll have to say sometimes, like, yeah, there may be subrogation potential, but let me walk you through and why we have potentially other causes that are an issue that we need to kind of rule out if we can. The other great thing is too, and it's been happening a lot lately, is I've had public adjusters and um, uh, just regular insurance adjusters. I'll see them pull out their camera and I'll go, if you want, I can give you an ESX file for your software. And they go, "Oh my gosh, you can do that?" And I go, "Yeah, I've already scanned the place." Whatever file format you need, I can export it and give it to you, and it saves them time. It saves the client, time and money. And the other thing too is sometimes I'll get out to a fire scene and I will identify potentially, hey, we need to put another company on notice. And that company then has to hire an insurance, an investigation firm to represent them. And so that way I can say, hey, the other investigator, I have a scan. This is what I found. I haven't, I've left it the way it is, but here's a lay of the land before you even get there. He may be flying across the country to meet me on another fire scene. And I go, this is what we're working with. And it helps him prepare, plan, what does he need to bring or kind of think about. And again, it saves us time. The camera, I mean, the camera is really the focus on why time is helping, helping the time lower itself and really just be thorough and accurate and paint that picture that we need for everyone.
Yeah,
It, it,
definitely.
it
Oh, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, just to jump in, one thing that I've heard not only in the fire side but across the industries, and you mentioned with public adjusters as well, it sets a base of truth so that there's not an argument of whose data is more accurate or what are your measurements accurate, to we get an accurate scan of the property. It provides that base level of truth, and so that allows you to have the better conversation of, okay, how do we come to an agreement on whatever the value is and all that. So it kind of stops the quibbling back and forth, is what, again, the feedback that I get from the industry and across, if it might be fire, flood, any kind of storm damage as well. And so it helps to move that conversation along faster as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would definitely say it also helps build a relationship. I think a lot of times you may come across people more than once. But I know that the industries are ever changing. If I'm being quite honest, you may not deal with the same PA or adjuster ever again, but it may also help them down the line as well as like say, hey, do you have this technology I've worked on? And I think it's kind of like word of mouth at that point because who doesn't want to have more time or be more efficient. And so it could set precedent for not just us, but for the claims process in general for every insurance carrier, regardless of who it is. I think all of this goes to show that this does help collaborate a little bit better and a little bit more, right? Because I think, Roger, you said this, someone may have to fly to you, and what better way than to send them something prior to them ever leaving so they can bring the right tools, and bring the right questions, when they are on site, and it gives them an idea of what to expect rather than them, back in the good old days when you didn't have that and they just show up and they're like, well, I didn't bring all the stuff that I needed. And then
Yeah.
there's lost time because they have to go get those pieces of equipment or those tools. And so I think this saves everybody time, but also sanity, if I'm being quite honest. So, back to you, Michael, on this, how does one get involved with you guys or learn more?
Sure. I mean, it's as simple as going to our website, which is goiguide.com. So goiguide.com. And I mean, we have a lot of information on our website. If you want to talk to a product expert, you can just fill out a form and they'll reach out to you, set up a demo call, walk you through the tech, and understand it a little bit better. So we also have service providers across the continent, that if you don't want to invest in the hardware yourself, you can always hire someone to go out. Now, this is very specialized claims, so I think you want to make sure that you have somebody who has that experience as a fire investigator, has the proper, gear to step into these type of spaces, because it's a health risk for sure. So, but at the end of the day, reach out to us and we're happy to help and answer any questions you like.
Thank you both so much for your time today. I think we covered quite a bit in less than 30 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, maybe we'll have to have a part two or kind of dive in later down the road. Fire season is almost here. I don't necessarily believe that there's seasons anymore. But thank you both so much. And as always, until next time, take care.